Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue
Namaste.
USA.
Namaste.
And before I begin, I wanted to say, please like, subscribe, and support our channel. Give your feedback that makes us better, or we definitely care for your voice and your thoughts. Today I have great pleasure in welcoming two of my very good friends, whom I know very well, Dr. Bharat Barai, who is vacationing in Ahmedabad, with a promise to convert the name back to Karnavati. So Bharatji, swagat hai. Thank you very much for coming on the show
Swagat hai.
today. And it is late for you in India. And Rahulji, you are here in New York, and you are definitely witnessing a
Namaste.
lot of Hamas-related Palestinian activities going on. So our conversation today is about Hamas and what Hamas has done in Israel. What is the significance of that for Islam as a community, United Nations as an institution, and people like you and I, ordinary folks, who are caught in the gunfire? So Bharatji has dropped off. He will come back soon. But the point of the matter here is very simple, and that takes me back to the year 9/11. United States earned significant global sympathy after 9/11 happened. But soon after, in its response, it lost that goodwill. With a continuous war in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and everywhere else, US also lost significant goodwill. In my humble opinion, I think this Hamas-driven atrocity, rape, murder, kidnapping, all kinds of evil things that one can think of to be done by an organization, it has taken the sympathy factor or support factor for whatever was known as the Palestinian cause. And the Islamic world's response to the whole thing is again very suspect. It's again my way or highway. So I want to begin the conversation with Bharatji. It is important for us to know that, this Hamas thing has rattled the US system rather badly. What do you think about that?
I agree. Hamas has been effective ruler of Gaza maybe for the last 16, 17 years. In 2007, the so-called election that took place, they came to power. Now the election is supposed to be every 5 years. Same thing happened in the West Bank. Mahmoud Abbas, his PLO, came to power at the same time. They've never done anything like election second time. They grabbed the power under the umbrella of having won, and they've been in power continuously for almost 16 years. And Hamas has used its authority that it established with support of Iran and Qatar, the money and the smuggled weapons. They've used everything to build the tunnels, to make the rockets. They've not done anything for the Palestinian people. And then Mr. Sinwar, who is supposed to be their leader, he tried to deceive. He tried to send information through Egypt that it wanted to give up the path of violence. It wanted to build Gaza like Singapore or Dubai. So it deliberately practiced falsehood, deceit to send message to Israel. And it's surprising that Israelis, who are pretty shrewd, they have Mossad, they have Shin Bet, they believed in this guy and his message sent via Egypt that it really wanted progress to build city and make port like Dubai or Singapore. And really it used that time to try to build up rockets, underground tunnels, war machine, and then surprise attack on October 7, 2023. Now, what it has done by killing innocent people, 1,200 almost of them, I think they should have known that Israel was not going to sit quiet and offer them the other cheek. So, what they are experiencing now is fierce retribution, and it has also given Israel a sort of an excuse to get the hostages released, and in the process, continue what they have to do to go after them. We all realize that innocent civilians are suffering, but I think the responsibility or the blame for suffering should go to Hamas. And that part, Ms. Jha, I'm kind of surprised. I don't see as much what is the fault of Hamas here. That they are the ones who started the whole thing, and they are the ones who receive the blame for what is happening in Gaza today.
That's a that's a very, very interesting statement. However, the important part here is, Rahulji, is that how does the United Nations, you are just retired from United Nations, you have been in very critical missions with the United Nations. How do you rate the United Nations operating in this particular response about terrorism as an issue, atrocities on women? And it kind of baffles because United Nations is a failed organization. Sorry to say that. The whole world says that. I'm not the only one making that statement. But their entire approach to terrorism and these atrocities on women, which has been rather documented very well, where is United Nations and what have they done other than, make in stupid remarks and blaming Israel for proportionality? That's another thing that bothers me, is that when they say, oh, Israel's response to the thing was disproportionate. And this bothers me. If you come to kill me and you miss the shot and I pump in 10 bullets in you, is my response disproportionate? I do not know, because these responses are emotional. There is nothing like, okay, you fire one bullet and I'll fire one bullet back at you. That's not proportional. Rahulji.
So, Vibhuti Ji, thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very pertinent question. And, having worked in the UN for a long time and looked at its performance recently in terms of, what its response was as an institution to the Hamas attack, I think it has comprehensively failed on three fronts and maybe a little bit of a success in one. So let me explain. The first is obviously that although the Security Council has the legal responsibility for maintaining international peace and security, clearly it has not been able to do so. So the active conflict continues. But the deeper failures of the United Nations in this regard are related to the subject of terrorism and women's rights. Now, terrorism is something to which the United Nations Security Council always says that it is one of the gravest threats to international peace and security. Now, if that is the position of the United Nations, then let us see how it has reacted in the face of these Hamas attacks. So the first Security Council resolution, which was vetoed by the United States, was vetoed on the express reason that there was no mention of Hamas and its terrorists. So you have a failure right there, because in innumerable occasions, the Security Council has condemned terrorism, but it failed to do so in this case. This was followed up by the General Assembly resolution, which called for an immediate ceasefire and also for an immediate release of the hostages. But again, what was missing was the word terrorism and any mention of Hamas. In the third resolution, which was adopted, I would say, unanimously by the Security Council by a vote of 13-0, in which the United States and Russia abstained, which was primarily concerned with increasing humanitarian supplies to Gaza. Again, there was no mention of terrorism. So therefore, Vibhuti Ji, what we are left with is once again a void in the International Organization of United Nations of what terrorism is. And the old divide between one man's terrorist and another man's freedom fighter continues. And consequently, this has terrible consequences for the whole world, because you don't know when is a terrorist act and when it is not. And in this case, the UN has demonstrated that it is entirely situational, because the attacks by Hamas were clearly absolutely terroristic in nature, but the organization did not have the institutional integrity to call them out. So, therefore, failure on the issue of terrorism. Now, let's come to the second very vital issue of violence against women. What was done to Israeli women on October 7th is, in my opinion, prima facie a crime against humanity. And shockingly, it took 57 days for UN Women to issue a condemnation about this. Now, this obviously aroused, deep ire amongst, the Israelis, because when women are attacked, when they are raped, does not matter what is their nationality, what is their religion, what is their color, what is their age. All that matters is a heinous crime has been inflicted upon her. So, therefore, failure in terms of terrorism, and failure in terms of calling out for women's rights, and failure in terms of maintaining peace. The only, shall I say, redeeming feature is possibly the humanitarian response, in which I'd like to say that you have three entry points into Gaza. One of them is controlled by Egypt and two by Israel, and Egypt, for instance, closes its Rafah border point, but Israel has opened it, with the result that the United Nations has been, to a certain limited extent, been able to mitigate the sufferings, the undoubted sufferings of the civilians in Gaza. So that is where we are. Failure on three fronts: terrorism, peace, and women's issues, and a little bit of possible some movement, some succor on the issue of humanitarian supplies.
Thank you. Thank you. Bharatji, I will solicit your thoughts on two clear thoughts of mine, which I want to definitely ask. One is the overwhelming response of Palestinian supporters and Hamas supporters in the United States, from San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge to Brooklyn Bridge to BlackRock office in Manhattan, to name the place in the city, World Trade Center. The virtual bringing down, bringing the entire thing to stand still in America, that has probably shaken the mainstream Americans. These people are here for a very different purpose. It's not humanitarian, as Rahulji said. It's not anything else. It's to push their own agenda. And the second thought that I wanted to ask you was your thoughts in is the Indian Americans. I mean, the attack on the Jews and the way they are relating the entire thing, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on the other, is that they are trying to gain an advantage that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is the same thing, like Semitism is the same thing. Your thoughts on that?
The behavior of some of the Islamic students and maybe other supporters in the United States has been nothing but a pure hypocrisy. When the Rohingya refugees crossed over into Bangladesh and tried to cross, and many of them did, into India also, there is no Islamic country that has accepted them. Yes, they've infiltrated quite a bit into Bangladesh because they are in the neighborhood. They infiltrated via boats into Malaysia and to a degree to Indonesia. But there is no Islamic country that has accepted them or saying that, okay, guys, we would like to help you on a humanitarian basis. They expect India to take them, but none of them want to take them. Every time something goes happen, this 57 so-called Islamic Cooperation Council They always want to condemn India if something happens in Kashmir or anywhere else. But none of them have offered any kind of material support to these Rohingyas. You can see the same thing here. How many people have died in Syria? Close to 500,000 people in the internal thing. In fact, Syria, to a degree, is an apartheid state where 22% of Alawite Shias are ruling over 78% Sunnis. And armed struggle has gone on, but we haven't seen anybody protesting either in front of United Nations or on the streets in USA or London for that matter, that this is an apartheid state. They accepted Syria back into the Arab League. Talk about Darfur. How many thousands of people died in Darfur? And they were all Muslims. Nobody protested. And you can go on these atrocities. How many people died in Iran? What the Islamic regime is doing in Iran. The women are being beaten up. They are being murdered. The people who try to demonstrate on the streets of Iran, they are being shot at. They are being murdered, imprisoned. Nobody is protesting. I mean, lot many more people have died in these countries on so-called humanitarian grounds, and nobody has ever protested. But when something happens in Israel, and to that matter, when something happens in India, all kind of fake narratives are being created. All kinds of organizations, they become active. They start throwing all kinds of narratives, many of them falsehood, go different city councils, go before Congress, and try to blame everybody else. So some of these Islamic bodies are very smart at creating fake narratives, creating incidents, and when the other side responds, they again create a sort of victim card kind of situation and blame the people who are already victims as if they are the ones who created problem. Like even for 9/11, they said that, oh, this was all fake thing, this was all conspiracy by United States, and this whole thing did not exist. So I think people of USA are a little slow to recognize what is happening and how a very small but very vocal and very violent minority is trying to take over the agenda and trying to play the victim card. I think in last 4 weeks or so, people are starting to realize more and more. I mean, we grant that majority of the Muslims, they are straightforward people, but a very tiny minority here is so vocal, so organized, so much help financially, and so active in creating fake narratives, false narratives, and then when they are being exposed to try to play the victim's card. I think people of United States are realizing, as it is happening in France, that there is a very tiny group here that is trying to hijack the entire system and try to fool them till they get exposed.
Bharatji, you have called out this, you called a spade, and which is very important. But I want to piggyback on one of your statement that a tiny fragment of the population indulges in these fringe activities very violently, but majority are good, which is true. Nobody can contest that, because in every segment, as we call it in our work field, extremes drive the middle until middle responds to that, because it is also a question of perception and reality, that if the majority keeps quiet, then it almost sounds like an accusations by those people. They are giving in to the extremist voices, like it's happening in Khalistani issue, like it is happening on terrorism issue. So the question here is very important, Rahulji, which I'm coming to you with that. How do you think this is impacting the US politics at this point in time? Because you have Vivek Ramaswamy, who is absolutely, totally against this entire thing. And then there are people who are playing political correctness. Ilhan Omar and Tlaib have openly threatened Biden that we will defeat you. I saw a video from Michigan Muslim Council making a very serious, very polished, very serious statement. The sum and substance was, and I'm quoting there, we have the money and we have the numbers. Mr. Biden, we are going to defeat you. How do you think it is shaping up?
So I think that it has already had a profound impact on US politics and not only US politics, beyond that. So let's try to break it up and see what's happened. First is that it has opened up a division in the Democratic parties between, on an age related basis, which is the elderly, the people in the upper age bracket are the ones amongst the Democrats who tend to support Israel more, whereas there is a much stronger support for the Palestinians amongst Democrats, who are the younger ones. And that is a very big fissure which is opened up in the Democratic Party, which they will have to deal with and which they have not found a way to deal with. Now, in terms of the reaction of the Muslim American community, their numbers have grown a lot since 2001, and they realize their political strength. They have expressed their dissatisfaction with the response of the Democratic administration in no uncertain terms, and they are determined to affect the outcome of the 2024 elections because they can be a swing factor in certain states. So the difficulty for them, of course, is the dilemma, as it were, is that who do they choose? If they leave the Democratic Party, then Donald Trump, if he is the nominee, let us presume that, he has said that he will bring back the travel ban. So therefore, they are faced with a choice of two equally unpalatable candidates from their point of view. Now, in addition to that, it has also affected other parts of American society, namely academia. And we have seen the drama which has been playing out with the testimony of the presidents of the three Ivy League universities, including Harvard and MIT, one of them who had to resign because they could not answer in terms of what have they done about anti-Semitism exactly. It has affected academia. Harvard, for instance, you have a university in Austria which has broken off relations with them. The president of MIT had to resign. They have had some of their enrollment has gone down, and even the money has gone down. Now, essentially, because of this very, very vocal minority, I think that the United States has imported a problem which I do not see going away for the foreseeable future. In fact, I see that this problem is only going to increase. If we have a look at what has happened in Europe, this has led to a fissure in their societies also. In Germany, for instance, they had to ban pro-Palestinian protests because of fear of violence. And here also we have had instances where people have not only, quote unquote, peacefully protested, but have also stopped others from going about their ordinary lives. In a highly symbolic gesture, they had occupied the entrance of the World Trade Center and had also shouted their Islamic slogan, Allahu Akbar. So this country has to be prepared. It is already riven by a lot of fissures. Add to it this fissure, which is going to be deeper and deeper in the body American politic. And I do not see, anything except a downward trend in this situation.
That's a very, very powerful statement that you are looking at a downward spiral because of certain communities becoming very vocal. In this particular instance, Hamas, Palestinians, and the entire Islamic world, there is no compromise, there is no discussion. Bharatji, that brings me to a very important question. As a very prominent member of Indian American community, how does the Indian American community deal with this scenario? Because in my thought, I always say we are next in the target. So if Semitism, anti-Semitism is being what it is, then we are already under attack in more ways than one. Majority of the Indians vote Democrats. Rahulji just said the Democratic Party is going through a fissure of its own. I can't believe, for example, that if you or I had made a statement that for Hamas's behavior or Palestinian behavior, entire Indian Hindu community must vote for a particular candidate or vote against a particular candidate, we would have been pilloried. But no mainstream media is talking about Ilhan and Tlaib's open threat to their own party president. Where do we fall in? And that's my concern.
Vibhuti, let me share you an incident which many of our viewers may not be aware of. Congressman Shri Thanedar is
Yes.
a member of Congress
Yes.
from 13th District of Michigan. He had made a statement in support, or he had criticized Hamas for attack on the Israeli civilians, rape, murder, abduction. Bunch of Palestinian supporters, they went to the Christmas party that he was attending and tried to attack them and do the sloganeering there. And if that was not the worst, at 3 a.m., they went to his house, knocking there and creating disturbance at his residence. So the hooliganism that we are talking about has affected an Indian American congressman from Michigan. Since I'm here in Bharat, I'm not aware of what has happened as a follow-up to this shocking incident, but a United States congressman has been threatened. His party of Christmas has been vandalized. His own personal home was attacked and tried to vandalize. How can any democracy function? I mean, any congressman represents his constituents, not just a very tiny, vocal, violent minority. I mean, if they start doing this to other congressmen, how can any democracy function? And the very people who talk about the rights of others, they don't respect the right of other ones to express their opinion too. And now talking about the Palestinians, all these people, the violent, tiny fraction of people, what have they done to support Palestinian people? Nothing. The money that has all gone into Palestine, and Vibhuti, I have to share with you a very interesting thing. In 2017, I visited Bethlehem. I also visited some of the other Israeli cities and some of the so-called Palestinian places. You know, we think that these are refugees and they are staying in refugee camps. That's not true. Their political status is refugee, but everybody helps them financially, the Arab countries, the United Nations, the United States, the Europeans, and they are staying in nice, reasonably comfortable apartments. At least I saw in Bethlehem and some of the West Bank towns. They are getting free food. They have no incentive to try to create a sort of space for themselves and a viable society. I said that if there are 6 million Indians who go to the Middle East and work, there are 2 to 3 million Thais, Philippines, some from Pakistan. If they go to the Middle East countries and work, livelihood, these people, because they are quote unquote classified as refugees, they have nice apartments that are built in. They have no work to do because free food is provided by United Nations. And to tell you, this United Nations officials, just like we used to say for India's bureaucracy, that the bureaucrats always want to create jobs for themselves. Same way, this United Nations people working in Middle East, they want to create jobs for themselves. They're very well-paying, nice jobs. And they always want to keep these people as quote-unquote refugees and not give them any kind of skills, don't give them any opportunity to create an industrial base or a service-based economy for themselves. So I don't think they are helping the people of West Bank or Gaza. They are remaining uneducated or poorly educated. Yes, they are kept comfortable as refugees. It's like you can give somebody money, or you can give them the skills so they earn the money for themselves for their lifetime. So this is another tragedy of what is happening in Gaza and West Bank, or you want to call it Judea and Samaria, where these things are happening. And I saw it. I was kind of surprised. I said, hey, these guys are living in an apartment better than most people in Mumbai are living.
You are telling, the report with your own, what you have seen.
Yes, I saw it myself.
Yeah, I mean, you are right. So many other details. We only know about the victim part of it and the suffering part of it. We don't know the truth. And, that brings...
Listen, half a million Hindus were kicked out by the Islamic radicals from Kashmir in 1989. That was the crystal light in Kashmir. What happened to them? Yes, some of them still stay in refugee camps, but most of them found a job for themselves. They created space for themselves. They created industry for themselves. And most of them are settled and self-supporting. So many Sindhis who migrated from Pakistan, they came to India, they settled themselves and become very good businessmen. Unfortunately, whenever the partitions occur and there is a exchange of population, then some displacement does occur. Some bloodshed occurs, unfortunately. It happened in 1947, a time of partition of Greater India into Pakistan and India. But what did we do? We moved on. We have not tried to play the victim cards for last 75 years. It doesn't help. And in last 10 years, right now I am in Bharat and I am seeing what is happening. Even the people are telling me here there has been tremendous development, especially in last 10 years. India has built itself into the 5th largest economy of the world and on its way to become the 3rd largest economy of the world. And not try to claim, oh, Pakistan did this. Ultimately, you have to help yourself and build up. And whatever transition occurred in 1947, including the massacre of many of the Hindus and even Sikhs who migrated from what is now part of Pakistan, unfortunately, the Palestinians either have not done it or the Arab states and rest of the world has pampered them so much, calling them refugees, and providing everything and not allowing them to stand on their own feet.
You are quite polite and blunt about this entire matter, and I would take this further with Rahulji on this conversation. That something is very important. The entire Arab world is not receptive to accepting the Palestinians as a refugee, even as a refugee. The global migration patterns, if you see, all Muslims are going to Europe and America, but nobody goes to another Islamic country. Can you explain that dichotomy to me? Because I don't get it. Because if you come to this part of the world and you insist on your way of life, why not go somewhere where your way of life is prevalent and be happy there, instead of coming here and trying to make us do what we are not accustomed to doing? So how is the entire Muslim world reacting to this refugee scenario in Palestine?
So I'd just like to actually, supplement what Dr. Barai said based on my personal experience of the Palestinians. I have traveled in the Middle East and I've gone to, there's an organization, UN organization you must have heard of, the United Nations Reliefs and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. Now, we have the following facts in front of us, that no Muslim country, including the neighboring countries, are ready to take in the Palestinian refugees. There are various reasons for that. They say they don't want a change in the situation on the ground, and therefore that Israel should not take advantage of this, and consequently we are closing ourselves off to Palestinian refugees. even if we take this argument at face value, there are other uncomfortable aspects which cannot be ignored. For instance, the fact that the Rafah border crossing, which is the crossing between Egypt and between Gaza, this is a fellow Muslim country. And after the attacks on October 7th, you would expect that a fellow Muslim country would keep this border open. In fact, exactly the opposite happened. Egypt closed the Rafah border, and it is subject to frequent closures on their behalf. Both Jordan and Egypt have said that absolutely no Palestinian refugees. Now, let's accept this argument at face value and see what are the other ways in which the Islamic world is supporting or not supporting the Palestinian refugees, because UNRWA is the focal point. Now, who funds UNRWA? And I was looking at some figures yesterday. The point is that Gaza and West Bank have a lot of money coming in, and that money is overwhelmingly coming from the West, from the US, Germany, France, Switzerland, UK. Now, these countries are contributing double because the EU contributes and then Germany contributes. Now, interestingly, what are the Muslim countries doing in this regard? India, there are a total of 98 donors to UNRWA, in which India is 27th and it donates $5 million. But Indonesia and Malaysia, which is the world's largest Muslim country, they are at the rank of 54th and 55th. The only two countries which are in the top amongst donators are Turkey and Saudi Arabia, far, far behind the European Union and USA. You have Pakistan, for instance, contributes $8,756. The only country which gives lesser than Pakistan is Maldives, which gives $5,000. Bangladesh gives more than that. And consequently, what we have is a small enclave in which a huge amount of money is being funneled in, and with the result that they really have no incentive to work hard and become productive. And in terms of, the other part of the equation is that you still have, a substantial Arab population in Israel, but we know the fate of the Jewish population in the Middle East and North African countries, where it has drastically declined as a combination of, persecution and all kinds of pressure put on the community. So therefore, in financial terms, you do not have very little financial contribution from the Muslim world to support the Palestinians. They do not take refugees. And Dr. Bharat Barai has already said that theirs is not a consistent stand, because right now, for instance, you have Pakistan, which is expelling Afghan refugees, and that issue is certainly not on their mind at all. So it's an issue of convenience, and the West has now to deal with it for a very long time. And as I say, the trajectory looks only southwards.
That's that's an important statement to say, that what you just said. And important part is that we are getting to know of it. I always say that news travels faster than the speed of lightning in this digital era, euphemistically speaking, of course. And we get to know the truth, things that we would never have known. Think about it. We are discussing this matter so openly, and we are quoting facts. So the question here is, again, Bharatji, is that if the Islamic world is behaving in the manner that they are, with reference to the Palestinian plight and their duplicitous behavior in this regard, the question arises, how has India's response been to so far? Because a lot of people are expecting India to make a particular stand. India must support Palestine because of the Muslim population and all that. But Modi, in my opinion, had taken a correct stand of condemning Hamas for what it is. But India is under pressure. But what do you think about India's response has been, and what must be, you and I, all three of us here, and Indian Americans here, Because we are also a target of attack by various groups in this part of the world. Where do we go from here?
As you said rightly, Prime Minister Modi condemned the attack by terrorist organization Hamas.
Right.
Look at every day what Hezbollah is doing. Every day they are threatening from Lebanon border. There is no issue there, but Hezbollah is creating. Iranians are threatening every day that they are going to destroy Israel. Israel is a one bomb country. They are talking about nuclear bomb. So how is it that these countries like Iran are openly threatening, they are openly funding Hezbollah and Hamas and getting away with it? How can one member of United Nations threaten openly the destruction of another member of the United Nations and get away with it? And no Islamic country has condemned Hamas. No Islamic country has condemned Iran. That how can they threaten the very existence of State of Israel? Thank God, Israel has its weaponry. Even though they are a tiny country of 10 million people, they have built themselves as a very modern economy and as a very modern armed forces, and they are able to defend themselves and retaliate. But here is the hypocrisy of the whole system, that nobody talks about how openly some Islamic countries are threatening the very existence of people. Think it this way, Vibhuti, there are 57 Islamic countries. What is wrong if Jewish people have a small country of 8,550 square miles to live? Why do they not have the right of their own existence, having their own land? In fact, if you look at it, in the biblical times, the land of Canaan, as they used to call it, that consisted of Israel and what is now West Bank, and they like to call it Judea and Samaria. We use the word Good Samaritan. Where did the word Good Samaritan come from? People who are in biblical times living in Samaria, which is the West Bank now. And that's where many settlers are moving, saying that this is their own ancestral land. And in 1917, when the British got the mandate to administer that area, they are the ones who gave the Balfour Declaration and promising that they will give the Jewish people their own homeland, which happens to be their ancestral homeland going back 4,000 years. So why is it not fair that Jewish people also get a place which has been their place for 4,000 years? Yes, we know in history the administrations of many countries have changed, but that does not make them the permanent owners of that system. I mean, New Delhi itself was ruled by Islamic rulers for almost 600 years. Does it mean that now India has to be an Islamic country ruled by somebody who is the next Mughal of Delhi? Or the Britishers ruled India for 200 years and they ruled many other countries in the world. Does that make them the administrators or the rulers of all those countries forever? So the Jewish people deserve a homeland, which they have since almost 75 years. They have developed that homeland into a very masterful economy, agricultural economy, industrial economy, digital economy. And look at their neighbors. They are still staying, quote unquote, as refugees, though their living standard is far better than any refugee. So nobody has helped these people. And by denying the reality, nobody is helping them. If you take out oil, what is there left in 57 Islamic countries? None of them today, I repeat, none of them are self-sufficient in food. When the Ukraine conflict happened and the price of wheat went up, everybody was complaining, which is true. Why? Because most of the Islamic countries, they are not producing their own food. They are not producing their own industrial items. So I think somebody has to call them, and I realize that not many people are willing to call it out. Hey guys, start taking care of yourself. Build your work, build yourself economy, build yourself agricultural state, and feed yourself. And
Thank
same
you.
thing is so-called Palestine. By the way, there is nowhere in the world or in the history a country like Palestine has existed. The area has been called Palestine after the breakup of the Ottoman Empire in World War One. The Britishers got the charge to administer that area. They called it Palestine. But there has never been a country called Palestine throughout the history. That area has been called Israel, Judea, Samaria, and then the Britishers called it Palestine when they got to administer it from the Ottoman Empire breakup.
So if I can just add to this, Vibhuti ji,
Yes.
recently I was in the United Nations, and a very uh, unusual photo exhibit is going on in the United Nations right now, which is being put up by a Jewish organization or an individual, in which the UN has a very long track record of voting against Israel. But this shows the photographic history of how the Jews were driven out from many countries in the Middle East and in North Africa. And you cannot fake this because you have documents, contemporaneous documents, demonstrating this much before, Israel came into existence. So there have been Israeli refugees from the Middle East who have gone into Israel, but let's not forget that they were also dispossessed and dispossessed of vast amounts of wealth. So if one has to talk about facts and have to talk about Palestinian refugees, this aspect of the problem, in fact, has just been swept under the rug.
I find it very curious and it angers me at times is that how is it, like you said just now, I have known about that history a bit, that how Jews were driven out from various countries and that they landed here to form their own. Kashmiri Pandits were thrown out of India under the threat of leave, convert, or die. Sindhis have no land of their own, no country of their own. But all these communities are thriving and surviving, right? How is it that this is the only community, the Palestinians and Islam, is always and perpetually complaining? That is something that, makes you think about it. But that was a comment. But I want to come back to you with the last question of the day for this conversation would be, where do we go from here? Like I said in my opening, that 9/11 created enormous goodwill for America, and America lost it by their actions in various parts of the world. It need not be repeated. Do you think that the world will awaken now to the realities, or are we also letting it go, this too shall pass? Where do you see the world? Well, this question is addressed to both of you. Either one of you can take off. The short-term, immediate impact in the election part next year, both in India and here, and the going forward in the short and the long term.
My feeling is when it comes to the elections in the United States, neither party can show sympathy for the terrorism directly, indirectly, tacitly. Because people in USA are tired of terrorism and pandering. And President Biden, his stand is well known. And if you go on the Republican side, as was pointed out, all the Republican candidates are strongly pro-Israel, whether it is President Trump or Nikki Haley or DeSantis or Ramaswamy.
Right.
So by trying to threaten Biden, we will not vote for you, I think they are going from -5 to -10. Because who are they going to vote? Rashida Tlaib is not contesting as president of USA. So who are they going to go and vote? They will have to vote either for the two or stay at home. So that argument is not going to work. And most of the white Americans, I would say most, are realizing that this is a nuisance. This is a violation of democracy. This is the misuse of democracy. And when what happened to Congressman Thanedar's story becomes more and more well known, people will say that this very tiny minority has sort of hijacked the US democratic system and they are trying to threaten the elected representatives of the country. So it's going to backfire on them. And I think it is already starting to backfire. How will it affect elections in India? I think people of India have become much smarter. This is not as much of an issue for them, though the Muslim community, it might be an issue and they might end up voting for Congress party, which they'll probably do anyway. So I don't think it is going to materially affect the elections in India. And I would say most people in India are really very glad that this time Modi ji has called out the terrorist as terrorist rather than trying to hide under the diplomatic nice seat and all kind of wording jugglery to try to support terrorists. But as Dr. Jaishankar said, we cannot have any credibility if we were going to support the Hamas terrorists directly or indirectly or tacitly and then complain about the terrorism in Kashmir. So they have to be consistent, and I'm glad that they are consistent. Now, what do we see as the future of Middle East in the short term and in the long term? In the short term, Israel is going to finish its job. Maybe it might take them a few more weeks, go after the central Gaza, and their job becomes more complicated because the Hamas terrorists and their sympathizers, their workers, they hide among the civilian population, which they have done, taking advantage of the hospitals, the schools, the all kinds of civilian places, and carrying out the bomb attack, using them to incarcerate people, using them as a storage depot for their arms, or processing of the people who were hijacked and who are kept in prison there. So what will happen in the long term? Either the Palestinians migrate to other Islamic countries, but then the same basic question comes: who is going to take them and what are they going to do there? So I think it's a difficult situation and it will be interesting to see how it evolves.
Thank you. Rahulji, same.
Yeah. So I think that you can look at it from several points of view. From the point of view of the American Muslim voting public, it is clearly a dilemma, because if you just go by the statements, they are very angry, and many instances have taken place where their supporters, along with the left, have broken the law, which is clearly a violation of democracy. But they will find themselves in a dilemma because they have two choices before them, neither of which they like. So therefore, what is going to be the outcome on the 2024 election, one doesn't know. But at the same time, we can say that there is a new divisive factor which has come into America, which has already happened in Europe. And in this, I would say a large part of the responsibility is on the press, in the sense that every genuine, heartfelt issue which has come from the European public, that immigration may be getting too much, has been derided as, quote, far right. So therefore, if in a democracy you cannot project the genuine feelings of the people and they're simply demonized for being, fascists, the result is a breakdown of democratic conversation. So what we are seeing is really a very grave failure which is happening in the democratic system. And the belief in democracies, in their effectiveness, in their representatives, has plummeted. And one of the reasons is that people are not being told the truth by the media, whose responsibility it is to be objective without fear or favor. That's one. Number two, when it comes to the Middle East, I think I have a slightly more nuanced position, because when the Hamas attacks happened, it is very interesting to note that the UAE had condemned it. And two countries, that is Egypt and Jordan. Now, Egypt has a peace treaty with Israel since 1979, and they're very serious about the security. Jordan is also had first-hand experience of the Palestinians coming and trying to do a lot of mischief in the country. This attack had occurred, just if you remember, when there were movements afoot by Saudi Arabia, to establish closer relations with Israel. You have the Abraham Accords, and then there is a question of money always speaks. Now, I was reading that in Jordan, it has been terribly affected by a fall in the tourist revenue. 60% of the revenues have gone, because obviously people are not willing to come out there when they think that this is a gravely disturbed region. To what extent is it happening in Egypt? I don't know, but I think there are figures out there. So therefore, the economic reality of the continuation of this conflict might bring some kind of sense to Islamic countries. But at the same time, the issue is highly emotional, and I would say it is kind of beyond facts, so to speak. It is not an issue which is subject to a rational debate or a conclusion, or whether you can simply have a look at facts, because everybody has their own set of facts. So until this offensive of Israel continues, this is going to disturb the region. This is going to disturb the United States, and anger is going to persist out here. In terms of India, I think the Prime Minister did a wonderful job when he called out Hamas for what they are. They're absolute terrorists, because what they did to the Israeli civilians out there, in my opinion, is there is a prima facie case for crimes against humanity. Especially, I don't know if you read the New York Times article on the horrific sexual violence which they perpetrated on them. So that is really something, the details of which I would rather not give in a broadcast, because they are too shameful, too horrific, and they repel, human conscience. So in India, I think the Prime Minister, essentially, his popularity is based on performance, and his performance has been sterling. So in that sense, I think Bharat Bhai is right that the people of India are, rightly, behind him because of his actions and because of his results. There is, of course, dissension amongst the Indian Muslims, but at the same time, their voting predilections and tendencies have been well known. So therefore, I think that the majority is going to prevail. But overall, I am, I would say, pessimistic about the scenario in the short to medium term. In the long term, nobody knows. It's essentially unpredictable. Thank you.
Well, as the saying goes, in the long run, we all are dead. That's why the short term becomes the succession of short terms composes the ultimate happening in the long term. And that's what is important. But you talked about media, very correct. Well, you have one example here. We are talking freely and frankly and openly and boldly. So with this call, I will request my viewers, please like, support, and back us up, because we bring you the truth that very few dare to. With these words, I would say thank you very much, Bharatji, for taking such late night timing to do the show. And Rahulji, as always, grateful for your insights. And Bharatji, brilliant conversation. There was one issue that you very studiously avoided, and I compliment you for that, is that what is the Indian Americans in America going to do about it? What is our role going to be? But we'll keep that for another day. Because a prominent Indian American was accosted when she came out with her children from a shopping in San Francisco. And, she tweeted it around. And I also commented on that. That's totally unacceptable. Now, everybody, you and I, are targets. And one of the things that happens by these people, extremists of Islamic variety, is they target you and I as individuals, defying the judicial and the democratic norms of a society. That's inhuman. And we have to contest that. You cannot intimidate like Mr. Thanedar was done. I have not seen a single Indian congressman comment on that. I have not seen their tweets, whether it's Ro Khanna, whether it's Raja, or whether it's Pramila Jaipal or Ami Bera. None of them have seen their comments on that. That is something important. They did not even stand up to condemn Ilhan Omar for threatening their own party candidate in the president election. The threat, that's what I'm trying to say. We have a role to play. The world is looking at us. India is on the rise, and our philosophy is holding its own in these tumultuous times. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Both of you, grateful that you could join the show. And I said, Satyameva Jayate, truth must triumph, truth will triumph. But for truth to triumph, you have to become Yuddhagrast. You have to stand up for it. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Thank you.